I'm Ellie. I used to teach fifth grade for over 30 years, raised my son on a teacher's salary, and kept every single report card he ever brought home. I was the kind of mom who stayed up late baking cupcakes for school events, who knew the names of all his friends, and who never missed a parent-teacher conference. I didn't think I'd ever be the kind of mom who'd lie in an ICU bed alone, watching the heart monitor blink like a countdown. The clot hit me while I was making tea. One moment I was reaching for the kettle, the next I was on the floor, gasping for breath that wouldn't come. The EMTs said I was lucky. The doctor said I flatlined for 42 seconds. I don't remember much, except the cold. And then waking up under fluorescent lights with tubes in my arms, and a nurse gently calling my name. I couldn't speak at first. My throat was dry like paper, and every breath burned. They said I had a pulmonary embolism and I should have died. But I didn't. And the first thing I thought of, the very first person I wanted to tell I was still here, was Evan, my son, my only child. I asked for my phone with hands that trembled harder than I expected, and when I heard his voice on the other end, I almost cried. But he wasn't alone. I could hear music in the background, laughter, someone shaking a cocktail shaker. It sounded like a party. I told him where I was. I said ICU. I said I could have died. He paused just long enough to make my stomach tighten and said, "Mom, it's Mia's birthday. We've had this planned for weeks. I'll come tomorrow. Don't make it a thing." Then he hung up. I stayed holding the phone long after the call ended, as if I just gripped it tighter he might call back. I stared at the ceiling tiles until they blurred together, blinking to hold back tears I couldn't afford to shed because the oxygen mask made it hard enough to breathe. The nurse offered to sit with me. I said no. I told her I was fine. But I wasn't. I wasn't fine when the sun went down and I was still alone. I wasn't fine when the night nurse dimmed the lights and my machines beeped into the silence. I wasn't fine when I opened my phone again, hoping for a text, a missed call, anything. Instead, I opened Instagram. It was Mia's story. There she was, smiling in a glittering gold dress, posing next to Evan. A sparkler flared from a cake behind them, and the caption read, "Best birthday ever." My heart didn't stop that time, but something colder than the clot settled into my chest. I stared at that photo until the screen dimmed on its own, and when I finally turned it face down on the blanket, I felt like I had disappeared from my own family. I don't know what hurt more, the fact that he didn't come, or the fact that it didn't even seem to cost him anything not to. The hospital let me out just after lunch. I called a van because Evan didn't pick up and I didn't want to wait for someone to remember me. The driver was kind, didn't talk much, just nodded when I told him the address. When we pulled up to my house, something felt off before I even stepped out. The flower pot by the porch was still there, but the spare key underneath was gone. I knocked once, then again. No answer. I leaned into the railing to steady myself and raised my hand for a third knock when the door swung open. Mia stood there holding a paper cup like I wears early for a meeting I hadn't agreed to. She smiled widely and said they were just about to come pick me up. I didn't ask where. I stepped inside, and the air smelled different. Too clean, like an air freshener trying to mask something. The living room looked staged. Tape marked off squares on the walls, and my furniture, my couch, my rocking chair wore orange stickers with the word "donate" in neat handwriting. I stopped in the doorway trying to understand what I was seeing. Mia called it decluttering, said it was for photos, just in case. I walked past her slow but steady and looked at the walls like a stranger. My quilts were gone. The bookshelf was half empty, its gaps filled with fake plants. I opened a drawer and found it neatly organized. Nothing where it should have been. I asked about my bedroom. She said they set up the guest room for me easier on the stairs. I asked again, where was my room? She blinked like she didn't expect me to push. "Upstairs," she said. "But we thought it'd be better if you didn't." That word we hung in the air like a weight. I looked at my walls and didn't recognize them. I looked at my home and didn't feel it. Everything familiar had been repackaged. I was standing in my own house, but somehow I was the one out of place. I went upstairs anyway. My body hated every step, but I needed to see for myself. The nightstand was empty. The ring was gone. My grandmother's ring, passed down through 3 generations, was always kept right next to the lamp. Not in a jewelry box, not hidden. Just where I left it. I asked Mia where it was. She tilted her head and said all valuables had been moved to safe storage. For my protection, she added. I didn't remember asking for protection. I didn't remember asking for anything. My fingers tightened around the stair rail as I came back down. In the kitchen, I noticed the pantry. All the boxes were lined up with their labels facing out like a store shelf. Too neat. Too intentional. I opened the tea drawer and something slipped from behind a box. It was an envelope. Sealed heavy, my name written in clean black ink. I didn't open it, just held it long enough to feel its weight and slipped it into my pocket. Then I heard a voice from the front door. A woman all smiles and perfume, wearing a blazer too sharp for a neighbor. She introduced herself as Tammy. Said she was just stopping by to check measurements and hand over a few documents. For the inspection, she said. The what? She handed me a clipboard and tapped a blank line. State requires homeowner consent. I didn't sign, I didn't say yes. I asked if she was family. She laughed and said, not exactly. Honorary. My breath caught as I looked past her at the blue tape on the walls. My house, my name. After she left, I sat at the kitchen table, the envelope still in my pocket. I didn't feel safe. I didn't feel protected. I felt like I had walked into someone else's carefully managed plan, and I was the last one to find out. I opened my phone, checked the hospital portal, and saw that my emergency contact had been changed the week before. No one asked, no one told me. And the only thing louder than the silence was the question growing in my head. What else did they do while I was unconscious? The study was quiet, almost untouched. Evan's old laptop still sat on the desk screen closed, but charger plugged in. I pressed the power button, half expecting it to ask for a password, but it blinked awake without hesitation. His inbox opened immediately. A thread sat at the top, bold and unread. It was titled, Project Reset. I clicked. The exchange between Evan and Mia felt casual, like they were planning a weekend getaway, not dismantling someone's life. She had written inspection confirmed for next week. Evan replied, good. Once she's settled in the new place, we can finally breathe. My hand gripped the edge of the desk. I scrolled further. A shared calendar link listed the estate sale next Saturday, a tour of assisted living and a house photo session. There were spreadsheets labeled duplicates, storage, and disposal. One note read, sentimental bulk discard. My eyes stopped at an attached folder named Listing Prep. Inside were photos of my living room, restaged with throw pillows I didn't own. I clicked through images of my own home like a stranger viewing an open house. In one, my prescription bottles sat lined up on the counter. Underneath, Mia had written, this helps if she resists. My stomach turned. Another message from Evan read, don't forget to update the bank. We need funds to be moved before any delays. I opened the banking app on the laptop. There it was. A new joint account in both their names created while I was still in the ICU. My pension had been redirected, skipping my account entirely. I went back to the email thread and found a PDF attachment titled TOD form. I opened it. It was a transfer on death form for the house with my forged signature. My breath caught in my throat, but I didn't let it out. Not yet. I took screenshots, printed what I could, and slid it into the hospital envelope, now bursting at the seams. Then I leaned back in the chair, stared at the quiet room around me, and let the cold, measured fury settle deep. They called it Project Reset. As if I were some system to be wiped clean. As if I didn't remember who I was. As if I wouldn't fight. I didn't waste another hour. I packed the envelope, slipped on my cardigan, and caught the next bus to the legal aid office downtown. When I stepped inside, the receptionist asked if I had an appointment. I said no, but I had proof. A young attorney named Priya came out, notepad in hand. I laid out the photos, the messages, and the form with my forged signature. She said we could move quickly if I was ready. I was more than ready. She drafted a letter revoking any authorization they claimed to have, and another to freeze activity on the estate and bank account. She asked if I had someone I trusted. I looked down and said I thought I did. Then I headed to the bank. Martha, the branch manager, had known me since my first paycheck. When I told her what happened, she didn't blink. She read the letter, looked me in the eye, and said, "We fix it. The redirect was reversed. The joint account is frozen." She created a new account in my maiden name, clean, private. We added a safe word, something no one could guess: tulip. I never liked flowers, which made it perfect. Martha handed me a slip of paper and told me to memorize it, then tear it up. I did. Then I asked for a small safe deposit box. One ring, I told her. She nodded and set it up herself. Before I left, I looked over my shoulder at the office, where I used to stand in line, with Evan helping him open his first savings account. The memory didn't sting. It just felt distant, like something I had loaned out and finally got back. By sundown, I had a trust in motion, my pension secured, and legal firewalls in place. No yelling, no public scenes. Just steps taken with precision. It felt like reclaiming a language I hadn't spoken in years. The language of boundaries. The language of no. For the first time in days, my breath came easier. Not because I was better, but because I was in control. At exactly 8, I opened the front door before they had the chance to knock. Evan stood there with a plastic bag in his hand, and Mia was just behind him, already speaking like we were late for brunch. I didn't offer a smile. I didn't step aside. I told them to sit. They hesitated, then took the chairs across from me at the kitchen table. I didn't sit. I laid out the hospital envelope, the screenshots, and the legal letters. I pointed to each one slowly, like a teacher explaining consequences to a student who thought they'd get away with cheating. While I was in the ICU, a transfer on death form was filed for this house. My name was forged. My pension was rerouted. An estate sale was scheduled. My emergency contact was changed without my knowledge. I paused to let it land. Neither of them spoke. Evan cleared his throat and tried to smile. He said it was planned. Just a way to help. Mia nodded, her voice sweet, saying they were trying to ease my burden. I asked who gave them the right to define my burden. Who gave them permission to decide my future while I lay unconscious fighting to breathe. Mia's smile slipped. She said I was overreacting, that this was about care. I leaned forward and asked if the care looked like stickers on my quilts. If love sounded like we can finally breathe in a message about placing me somewhere I hadn't agreed to live. Evan raised his voice then, said I was twisting everything, that I should be grateful. I told him gratitude doesn't come from manipulation. It doesn't grow out of betrayal. I reminded him I taught for 30 years, paid off this home, buried a husband, and never once asked for pity. Mia scoffed and said I was making it harder than it needed to be. I told her the hardest part was realizing my own child thought of me as an obstacle. I pointed at the form. That signature isn't mine. That's a crime. She said I couldn't prove it. I slid a letter across the table. I already did. I told them the accounts were frozen, the trust was filed, the realtor was notified, and the sale was canceled. I said if they pushed one more inch, it wouldn't be my lawyer they'd hear from next. Evan stared at the table like it might save him. Mia stood and said I'd regret it. I said if they walked out now, they could save the tiny shred of dignity they had left. But they wouldn't come back unless it was with my key, my ring, and every document they touched. Evan didn't speak. Mia turned without a word. I followed them to the door and locked it behind them. I stood there, hands still on the knob, and felt something uncoil inside me. Not anger, not sadness. Something older. Something closer to peace. I wasn't scared anymore. I wasn't begging. I was done being managed. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like the owner of my life again. I went to the store to buy milk and bread, simple things. I thought maybe, after everything, the world outside would feel normal again. But normal doesn't come back all at once. It comes in pieces, or not at all. I was standing near the apples when I felt it. That quiet attention. A woman across from me held her phone just a little too high. Her eyes met mine and didn't blink. Then she said it loud enough for others to hear. "You're the lady from the Post." The one whose daughter-in-law said she was confused. Another voice chimed in behind me. "That's her, the one with the estate drama." They made it sound like I was some fragile old woman clinging to things I didn't understand. I didn't flinch. I didn't explain. I took out my phone, tapped it awake, and looked that first woman in the eye. "If you're going to record me," I said, "at least get the right angle. Turn on your AirDrop." She frowned, confused, but did it anyway. Around us, other phones chimed. I sent the audio file, the one I'd saved. Evan's voice, Mia's whisper, words spoken when they thought I wouldn't hear them. "We need the money. For us, for our life." A young man by the cereal shelf accepted the file and played it on the speaker. The store went quiet except for their voices. Cold. Calculating. A woman near the bread said softly, "That's your son." I nodded. Another voice, sharper, said, "Leave her alone." Someone else muttered, "She doesn't sound confused to me." I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I just stood still and let the weight shift. The story had been twisted without me, but the truth was mine. And now they had it too. By the time I left, no one followed me. No one stared. I walked out with my bag light and my shoulders straighter. On the sidewalk, I took a breath and let it stay. Somewhere between those voices and that audio, I got something back. Not just my name, my place. I didn't go viral because I asked to. I went viral because the truth doesn't need staging. It doesn't need stickers or signatures. It just needs daylight. And for once, the daylight was on my side. I packed only what mattered. My quilts, one framed photo, aimed. A small box with my grandmother's ring now locked in the bank's safe again. Everything else I donated. The dishes, the couch, even the rocking chair where I used to read to Evan. A local shelter sent a truck and 2 kind women who asked no questions. They just smiled and said thank you. I moved into a quiet rental by the coast. Small, bright. Enough. The sea hummed outside the windows and reminded me there was more to life than heart monitors and forged signatures. I brewed tea without checking over my shoulder. I slept without listening for footsteps on the stairs. The house was gone, but the peace I built here came from something far more solid. At the bank, I finished the trust paperwork. A scholarship fund for nursing students, a donation to the shelter. My name is signed with purpose. I left nothing to Evan or Mia, not from spite, from clarity. Some doors don't need to be reopened. Some lessons don't get repeated. I wrote 2 letters. One to Priya with a thank you and a copy of every legal form filed. The second is to myself. 4 lines only. You were not crazy. You were not alone. You kept receipts. You got up. Then came the 3rd letter. For Evan. No greeting, no anger. Just a copy of the trust, a photocopy of the forged TOD form, and a post-it on top. I taught you better. I left the envelope on the counter of the old house just before closing. The sun hit it right as I stepped away. I didn't turn back. The buyer's agent confirmed the wire had landed. The house was no longer mine. But what I had now was better. It was mine entirely. The last message I got from Evan came a week later. A short email. "We didn't know you'd go this far." I didn't reply. Because what he never understood was that I had already gone farther than they'd ever see. I had taken back my name, my voice, my peace. I drank coffee without bitterness. I read books without checking the clock. The waves outside moved like breath. Constant, unbothered. I listened. I wrote in my notebook again, not as a record, but as a witness of myself. I didn't disappear to punish them. I left because I was done shrinking inside someone else's version of my life, done apologizing for staying alive, done waiting for someone to choose me when I should have been choosing myself all along. This peace was not given. It was built. Slowly, deliberately. And no one gets to undo that. Not now, not ever.